To the small island of people who actually liked this movie, got room for one more. What's going on, guys, and welcome to my review of Borderlands, the latest game adaptation that Hollywood has attempted. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking here. I really do appreciate it. Based on a game series, this is something that I've never played before. I've never played a single game of Borderlands at all. But it's something that I've heard of. It's something that I've seen around. I knew about the big hulky guy with the mask. I knew about the Mad Maxian background and all the weird stuff that pertained with it. As we all know, we've had a slew of bad game adaptations. Almost to the point to where I think Hollywood has some sort of grudge against game makers. I don't know. The one that really frustrated me the most was Max Payne. Growing up, I loved playing that game on PlayStation 2. By the end of my game playing days back then, I could play that game blindfolded. When it came time for the movie to come out in 2008, I watched it. I thought to myself, what are you people doing? Just stop it. Just really, I was so disappointed. Unfortunately, Borderlands piled onto that according to everybody else. Essentially, in this film, you have Lillith, an outlaw bounty hunter who forms an alliance with a band of misfits after she is hired by a very powerful man to help find his missing daughter. This was something that piqued my interest. Watching the trailers, this was something that really interested me. As I've said, I've never played a single one of these games. Never had the luxury, which should plant some sort of a defensive gate on what I'm getting ready to say. As an action fan, I can honestly say I liked this. I had fun with this. On one hand, I understand people's beef with this. But on the other hand, I thought it was good. But just how good or bad was this? Was this the greatest action flick to ever exist? Or was this just another dumpster fire, according to everybody else? Starting off with the positives, I do gotta say the action was pretty solid. You get some pretty solid, pretty cool action scenes here. Some pretty cool moments, some pretty tense, edge of your seat moments. And that's something that I was quite expecting. That was something that I was expecting from the get-go. Despite what I've heard of this film, despite all the negativity surrounding this, that was something that I definitely knew I was going to get some pleasure out of. The action sequences, the way the movie was shot, the way the backdrop looked, I thought it was pretty amazing. You know, I know that may seem like a little bit of an over-exaggeration for something like this, but I thought it was pretty cool. So much so that the pacing felt perfect. This movie clocks in at 1 hour and 40 minutes. Felt more like an hour. That's how much fun I had with this. It went along with such a nice pacing. So much so that by the end of it, I wanted more. That's right. I said it. It went by so fast for me. That's how much fun I was having with this. Gosh, I definitely am on that island. But at least I wasn't alone. I went with my two best friends who also enjoyed it just as much as I did. Again, about the background, I thought it was very beautifully done. It was very well crafted. Rolling in, I thought this was going to be a film ruled by cheeseball effects and really unsatisfying backdrops and set pieces, but it actually quite surprised me. It actually looked pretty cool with that Mad Maxian feel, because the film takes place on this planet called Pandora, which has a very Mad Maxian feel to it. Just like dryness everywhere and nothing but sand, and it just looked like a wasteland. And again, as much of a fan as I am of those films of Mad Max, I knew I would appreciate that. Ariana Greenblatt, who plays Tiny Tina, the supposed missing daughter of the film, she was quite a character. Very zany, very fun, very cartoonish and outspoken, and was the most funnest character that I've ran into in a film like this. She really stuck out like a sore thumb, but in a good way. Very highly strung. And I thought Greenblatt did a pretty good job with her character. Again, I never played the games, so I have no idea about this character or any of the characters in this film for that matter. But I thought Greenblatt did a really good job with putting this character together. She was a character that I was able to follow along throughout the whole entire movie because I was having so much fun with her. It was just a joy watching her work and just what she brought to this character because of Greenblatt's performance. And honestly, she was the only one that seemed like she was having fun.
Time to make it rain with your body parts.
She was just really rolling with it, and I really did appreciate that. Moving on to my mixed. I'm not necessarily sure if this would have been the choice that was made. I think it was Eli Roth's choice to make it PG-13 anyway, but I kind of would have preferred a little bit more blood and gore with the action and the level intensity that this film brought. Now, this is supposedly one of the reasons why a lot of the game fans and the fandom got so pissed off when this film was released. They found out that this was going to be a PG-13 rated movie from a game series that was nothing but mature rated. Blood, gore, sex, and whatever else that those games had thrown out. You make a movie out of a game series like that that's PG-13. I don't know. Even though I've never played the games, it's just something about that just didn't quite sit well with me. I would have preferred a little bit more blood and gore with my action sequences. But again, the upside to this is the way the action sequences was created wasn't bad. It was decent. It was fair. It was fun enough. But I would have preferred a little bit more kick, a little bit more spice, if you know what I mean. Just a little bit more flavor in order for me to get the full satisfaction of what this movie could have been. Would it have made a difference box office wise and the hatred for it that this got? Probably not. But for me, it probably would have done it just a tad bit more justice overall. Now, I know the ratings shouldn't always matter. PG-13, R-rated, whatever. But you're dealing with a game series that's been adult-themed from the very get-go, which I really believe that they should have handled that a lot more carefully for the film. They really should have made it R-rated just for that point alone. Same thing I said about Max Payne. That was a mature, adult-themed game as well, yet they decided to make that one PG-13 too. I don't understand what the logic is behind that, and that goes back to what I said about, I think Hollywood has some sort of grudge against game makers for some reason. But I just felt like, at least for Borderlands, it probably would have made it a little bit spicier, gave it that extra oomph. If they'd have just made it R-rated and made it as gory as possible. Again, I know that always doesn't matter, but I think in this case, it should have been made as an exception. I just think that it would have probably fit the criteria of the story a little bit better. Now again, would that have made a difference with all the hate it got and the box office numbers that it's pulling, the weak box office numbers that it's pulling in? Probably not, but still. Moving on in the negatives. As much as I praise this movie, as much as I'm not hating on it as much as everybody else, which I still don't get, it still has its problems. I'm still going to acknowledge that it still has its flaws. And one of them is the rest of the cast just didn't seem like they wanted to be there. Jamie Lee Curtis, which is a renowned actor, and I loved her ever since the original Halloween. She's one of those actors that I'm glad I'm seeing something else being played with her in it other than Halloween. But something like this, it's just, her character just wasn't interesting. Same with Cate Blanchett, same with Kevin Hart, and they just didn't feel like they were all in it. And it just felt like they were just passing by and they just wanted a paycheck. It just didn't seem like they wanted to be there at all. Now, a little history behind this film. There's a bunch of delays, there's a bunch of rewrites and reshoots. This film actually started shooting in 2021. 3 years ago. But it had a lot of problems from rewrites to reshoots. Then it pretty much got set to the side collecting dust until last year. From what I understand, I think continued filming after the SAG strike. To where by that point, director Eli Roth had pretty much moved on. By that time, he'd already been working on the script for Thanksgiving 2. And they brought in director Tim Miller, who directed the first Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate, to finish up all the reshoots and the rewrites, whatever happened on that front, and finishing up all the photography and all that. And some might say that it's a pretty different film than what Eli Roth wanted to do. Kind of reminded me of the story of how the Justice League debacle went down with Zack Snyder and all the troubles he was going through, and then bringing in Joss Whedon to finish that, and how it was such a completely different film from what Zack Snyder wanted to. Kind of the same situation, probably not to that extent, but still. It's just way too many red flags. And by that time, the rest of the cast was just not really into it so much because they had to get some of them back, which was a miracle that they were even able to do that in the first place. And again, I think that has a lot to do with why some of the cast just felt off. I give hats off to Ariana Greenblatt because, again, she was the only one that actually felt like she wanted to be there and felt like she was having fun with it. For still having that enthusiasm after all of that. Now, unless all of her scenes was filmed before all that stuff happened, but still. Yeah, I gotta talk about Kevin Hart being in a serious role. You know, love him or hate him, he's always been a funny guy to me. He's always been one of those goofballs. And whenever I found out that he was being cast as a serious role in this film, it just never sat well with me. From the moment he shows up, it just felt weird right off the bat. He's always been the guy that cracks wise. Those enthusiastic outbursts of his is what I've known him for. And throughout the whole entire film, from the moment he shows up, I was waiting for him to just do something. Just something comedic. Something that I'm used to seeing from him. And it never happened, and it just felt weird. Now, I'm all for actors doing something different, but once you find a style that works for you, like if you're in that business and you find a style that works for you, stick with it. Don't do anything else. Just stick with it. And I felt like with Kevin Hart's character for Borderlands, it was just weird, and it just something I could not get behind. Hollywood, don't do that again. Don't. Oh, and Claptrap. He was the most annoying character ever. My one friend that I went with, she said that she loved him. She laughed the whole way through, and hey, that's good. All power to her. But I just couldn't get behind this character. I thought he was the most annoying character in the history of movie characters. And what was more disappointing was he was voiced by Jack Black, who was one of my favorite comedic actors. I love that guy for all his bantering and goofiness. This film did the one thing that I thought would never happen. Made me annoyed by this character and Jack Black's performance. That's something I didn't think I'd never say in my lifetime reviewing movies. Is putting Jack Black in a part to where it gets me annoyed at Jack Black. Oh. How far are we fallen? Because most of the jokes that was told in this, especially from him, fell flat. There were maybe a couple that made me chuckle just a little bit, but not enough to earn its spot in the spotlight. For the most part, crickets. I felt like the plot was very generic. It's something that we've seen countless of times before. Yes, someone who hires someone to find their daughter who's missing. And it just sort of felt played out. It's just something that I felt like I've seen countless of times. We just had so many movies that had the same scenario, and it was just nothing new here. And there's a lot of logic issues to where you can kind of tell where the reshoots came in and where they kind of stood out. Certain things happen that by the time you get to the third act, there are a lot of things that happen that just made zero sense whatsoever. To the point to where you're going, what? They try to pull this wool over your eyes and do a complete 180 that just never really sat well with me, and that certain events laid up to that moment to where you're thinking to yourself, well, how can that be when this happened before, but now this is happening? And it's like, you can really tell the reshooting vibes that happened on this film, to where it's like they forgot certain things because of so many reshoots and so many rewrites, that it just made it illogically impossible for me to understand, because there's just certain things that happen that just didn't feel quite sturdy, and it just made it feel all over the place, and it was just making it feel kind of chaotic in a way, and it just left more questions than answers. But in the end, I still enjoyed this movie despite its flaws, which there was plenty. I still enjoyed this movie. I really don't think it deserves the hate it gets. Was this the greatest thing ever made? No. Do I think it deserves the kind of hate that it's getting? Of course not. It may have its issues, but I enjoyed it for what it was. A happy accident. So Borderlands, what was your thoughts on it? Have you seen it yet? Are you a fan? Did you find this to be somewhat of a fun watch? Like me, are you one of those people who are on this island that actually enjoyed this more than others despite its flaws? Or are you somebody who just flat out hated it? And are you just over video game adaptations for good? Leave me your comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking here. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.